Hello friends, welcome to Feral Moon Designs, where today I'll be returning to a series I kicked off with my second video on the channel, Sculpting 90s Nicktoons.
On the Lord hut, here a hut, Nick. On the Lord hut, here a hut, Nick, Nick. On the rickety low while living #1 Nickelodeon.
In the previous episode, I sculpted Ickis from Aaahh Real Monsters. If you haven't seen the first video in the series, follow the link in the description or my pinned comment below. That said, Ickis seems a little lonely, so I feel like it's only right to reunite him with his best monster buddy, the one and only KRUMM. To do this, I'll be using some Super Sculpey Original, some translucent Sculpey, wire for the armature, a wooden base, and aluminum foil for bulking. I'll start out by rolling a large ball of foil to create the base before covering that with clay and smoothing it out to make sure that everything is even and avoiding air pockets. I'll then go in and remove the clay from the area where the mouth will be and smooth that out. This will create a base and an opening for the mouth later on. Once that's done, I'll jam some wire into the clay and the foil ball itself to create an armature for the legs before giving it a quick bake to form a base. Fresh out of the oven now, and with some time to cool, it's time to go in with my hobby knife and remove some of that excess foil. Next, I'll mash down the remaining foil before going in and covering what's exposed with some clay. Then, with some bacon bond applied to the surface, I'll go in and start bulking out the body. With that all smoothed out, I'll drill 2 holes and add some wire for the arms. And once again, turning to the trusty bacon bond, I'll begin adding some clay to the arms. This is where I'll begin to form out the body using some scraping tools. Once I have a general shape in place and everything is smoothed out, I'll use some strands of clay to form the wrinkles around the arms. Then with some bacon bond, it's time to attach that nose. I'll blend the seams and use a couple balls of clay to form the nostrils. Then going in with my ball stylus to form those olfactory tunnels. Next, I'll apply some rolled out clay to the inner edges of the mouth to form the gum line. Taking a break from the body now, it's time to make some teeth. I'll use my clay extruder to push out a snake of translucent Sculpey and cut that into individual pieces to form each tooth, and using my scraping tools to add line detail and general deterioration on the teeth. From there, I'll move on to making some eyeballs. To do this, I'm going to use some printed out irises. I'll press those into some balls of clay before applying a cabochon and pressing firmly to make an indentation. I'll then make sure that the eyeballs are formed correctly and push up the excess clay slightly around the edges of the cabochon. With those teeth and eyes complete, it's time for me to return my attention to that mouthful region. I'm gonna start blending in that gum line before going in and adding a little more of a mouthy texture to the inside of his mouth. From there, it's time to give our favorite crusty monster a tongue. Now, with all of that out of the way and our teeth freshly cured, it's time to start jamming them into his gums. With the inner details of the mouth out of the way, I'll add some strands of clay along the exterior to form the lips and then blend those in along the seam. From there, I'll use my rubber shaping tool to add some cracks and details along the lips. Now it's back to using my scraping tool to form out the body details, including musculature and wrinkles and, that butt crack. And speaking of that butt, I'll add some discs of clay and blend those in to really accentuate the cake that KRUMM is working with. And with those gluteus globes complete, it's time to move on to the hands. I'll apply some snakes of clay to the palm before blending those in and applying some balls and blending for the knuckles. I'll use my shaping tool to form the creases on the inside of the fingers. Then using the bottom edge of a scoop tool, I'll form indentations where the fingernails will be before adding some balls of clay to shape the fingernails themselves. I'll then go in and add the line details on the knuckles before adding some wear and tear to the nails. Naturally, I'll repeat the process for the second hand. Before I attach the hands, however, it's time to turn my attention back to KRUMM's undercarriage, specifically to bulk out the legs. Not only will I create the general shape for his nubby little legs, but I'll add some wrinkle detail as well. And speaking of wrinkle detail, it's time to get my scraper tool back out and get to work. Here I'm carving out some of the wrinkle and fold detail on KRUMM's on KRUMM's chelly. Additionally, using some strands of clay, I'll form the wrinkle and fold detail around the mouth, above the mouth, and around the cheeks. Before attaching the hands, I'll go over the arms once more before snipping those wires to size. With that out of the way, I can slide those hands onto the wire armature and blend those into the wrists. Now that our stinky boy has his hands, I can go over his entire body with a texture roller I created and apply some essence of avocado. I'll then go in and add some warts and bumps to that fresh avocado skin. Using my ball stylus, I'll create some divots where his armpit hair plugs will go later on. I'll poke holes around his body for hair later on before throwing him in the oven for a quick bake. Once the body is cured and cooled, it's time to add some feet. I'll take some rectangles of clay and using some shaping tools, I'll cut the individual toes and start shaping those accordingly. I'll use my scoop tool to add the toenails as well. With KRUMM's tiny toes complete, it's time to add his feet to the body and blend those into his legs. Naturally, I'll also go in with my avocado skin texture roller and apply the skin texture to the feet and legs, as well as adding some wrinkle detail. And with all of that complete, KRUMM goes into the oven for one final bake.
Ooh, dinner time.
Once that final cure is complete, I'll let him cool and then I'll discover we've got a problem. As it turns out, during that final curing process, KRUMM got a crack in his crack. It seems our crusty little monster is just too thick. Have no fear though, a little bit of super glue and some sanding and KRUMM's crack is right as rain. Busted butts aside, it's time to move on to painting, and I'm going to start this off with a base coat of purple applied to the inside of KRUMM's mouth. I'll follow this with a base coat of light brown applied to the entirety of his body. Next, I'll go over the inside of his mouth with a red wash. And while I wait on that to dry, I'll use a mold that I created out of polymer clay and apply some glue into the divots, where I'll then put thread and allow that to dry to create his armpit hair plugs. From there, it's on to adding a base coat of black to the base, as well as some base coats to some extras that I made off camera. And then it's back to the mouth for a wash of pink. While I wait on the wash to dry, I'll go over the aluminum can with a metallic silver dry brush. And once that wash has dried and the fleshiness of the mouth has shined through, I can go in with a dry brush of red over the gums and the tongue. I'll follow this up immediately with a dry brush of pink with a little bit more heavier saturation on the tongue. With the inside of the mouth complete now, I'll go over the lips with a base coat of dark purple. And once that base coat is dry, I'll go over that with a dry brushing of a lighter blue shade. Next, using a mixture of marigold and beige, I'll dry brush over the entire body to blend and create the tone that I'm looking for. I do love this process, it's one of my favorite techniques, and I generally like the saturation that I end up with afterwards. Continuing on with the dry brushing, I'll hit the lips once more with an even lighter shade of blue. Moving on, I'll use a bone white to tickle his fingertips and toes. I'll then selectively go over some of his bumps and warts with a light brown. From there, it's back to washes. I'm going to use a dark brown wash on all of the teeth, as well as the extras that I created off camera. I'll also very carefully go over the back of the eyeballs with a red wash to kind of create that redness and irritation. After all, he's holding his eyeballs in his hands. And speaking of hands, we gotta tickle those fingernails with a dark brown wash. Back to the teeth now with another wash, this time to apply a yellowing effect. Moving right along now, it's time to go over KRUMM's entire body with a coat of matte varnish. And I'll follow that up with a quick coat of UV resin on the tongue and using my UV flashlight to cure. While I've got that resin on hand, it's time to do the eyeballs. I'll remove the cabochons and apply UV resin right onto the iris paper. I'll then reapply the cabochons and press them in firmly, and then apply resin to the entire exterior of the eyeball. I'll repeat this process for both eyes before putting them under the UV light to cure. With the eyeballs complete, I can attach the teeth. Using super glue applied to each individual tooth, I'll slot them into position and they're good to go. Just look at that smile. With those chompers in place, it's time to give our boys some armpit hair plugs. I'll simply use super glue for this and hold them firmly into place while the glue sets. I'll then use super glue applied to individual threads and apply those throughout his body into those holes I poked earlier. With all of that out of the way, I'll use super glue to attach his eyeballs to his hands. And with that, KRUMM is one manscaping short of being complete. Before I finish KRUMM, however, I need to do the base. I'm going to use a mixture of spackle, dirt, and paint to create the muddy dirt texture of the garbage dump. I'll stir this mixture well before applying it to the top of the base and pressing KRUMM in firmly using super glue to attach him with the armature wire. I'll use more mixture to fill in the gaps before placing the items that I made off camera. Additionally, I'll add some small pebbles and rocks as well. Once again, I'll go over it with a bit more of the mixture to fill in the gaps and make sure everything is held into place. Once that's done, it's time to get the flock out. I'll use that flock across the entire base and generously apply some grass texture. While I let that sit for a few, it's time for some very much needed manscaping on KRUMM. It's time to trim back those armpits and some of those body hairs. Quick spritz of isopropyl alcohol to help with adhesion, before going over the entire base with some diluted PVA glue to hold everything in place. I'll quickly add some rust and weathering effects, and with that, folks, there's nothing left to do but move on to the showcase.
Fresh out the box. Stop, look and watch. Ready yet? Get set. It's all that.
I want to take a quick moment to thank you for watching. I put a lot of time into these projects, between the dozens of hours spent sculpting and painting to the additional hours of editing these videos, and it means a lot to know so many of you enjoy the product of my time. I hope you found enjoyment in this episode, and if you did, it would help out a lot if you leave a like and share this video with your friends, family, pets, or AI companions. If this is your first time watching, consider hitting subscribe and join us next time for more projects just like this. Regardless, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care out there, and thanks again, friends. I'll see you again soon.